87 degrees. Christine Ieronimo is with us. My goodness, I'm starting off on the back foot.
That's
but
okay.
I've got to tell you, it was remarkable both getting a copy of your book and also reading the story in the Republican American, the Woman section, a couple of weeks back about an adoption that took place. You, of course, as a Bristol mom of how many children? 2 other children?
I have 3 biological children.
3, okay. And now you have a 4th child.
My 4th child,
And
yes.
I guess a lot of people would wonder, why would you adopt a child? I mean, you have 3 of your own, and it's quite a commitment to both time, resource, love. Explain to us what your motivation was.
My motivation, well, you'd need an hour to get the whole story, but I have to tell you, about 10 years ago, I lost my aunt to breast cancer, and in her honor, because she was the most wonderful person in the world, my family and I decided to sponsor 2 young girls in Uganda. Now, I didn't know very much about Africa as a continent or the countries in Africa, and so it was pretty random, but after a few years of sponsoring these 2 lovely girls and enabling them to be a part of a program where they could go to school, it just really opened my eyes to another part of the world that I really didn't know anything about. And they became a part of our family. We wrote letters to each other. We sent pictures, and we truly loved these 2 girls. And then one day, out of the blue, I was called by the agency that did the sponsorship, and we were told that one of the girls died from complications from a blood transfusion. So that was really hard for me, especially.
Well,
I'm a nurse. And it was hard for me because she wasn't a statistic, like the statistics you see when you hear about things like this in countries in Africa or in other places in the world. She was a person, and she wanted to be a nurse, and that really, really affected me. And I just felt like I wanted to do more, and it sort of led me on this journey to our adoption and to our daughter.
And that has to be, though, such a difficult decision to make as a family, bringing in someone who is, very different from you in so many ways, their experiences, their understanding of our culture, so on and so forth. It had to be quite an adjustment. How much did you have to talk to your own children about it, your husband? I mean, what a family decision this is.
The decision was actually very simple, and I didn't have to talk to my children at all. They were 100% on board. There was never any issue of why are we adopting somebody that's very different. I mean, as soon as we decided this is what we want to do, she was already a part of our family, and we couldn't wait for her to get here. And I mean, my children are actually, I admire them so much because of how they embraced everything. And she's a part of our family. She is their sister, and there's nothing different about her to them. And we love her.
Now, what was it like even starting the adoption process? I mean, we were talking about Russia before. We know that there's been all kinds of issues with Russia about adoptions. What's it like to adopt from Ethiopia, from Africa?
Well, when we started the adoption process, it was a time when Ethiopian adoption was was something that was quite new. And it was actually relatively simple for us. And since then, things have changed. They've made adoption from Ethiopia a little bit harder. It really only took us 9 months. And that's on the shorter end, actually, from start to finish. I think things have changed a little bit. They're making it a little harder, making the process a little longer, because there was actually an explosion of adoptions at the time that we adopted. And so, there's a lot of paperwork involved, obviously, but it's just something that we put our minds to, and we did.
Okay, now you sound like the type of person that when you put your mind to it, it does get done.
Yeah.
And this spawned a children's book and a humanitarian mission, but also something that people might have been curious about when they read the article, and that is the relationship that you started building with her biological mother and your concern about her health and well-being.
Well, when I went to Ethiopia the first time, I did get to meet her biological mother, and it really was, it was a meeting that just changed me forever. I mean, this was a woman who put her own needs aside, who made the selfless decision, unthinkable decision, to give up her daughter. She was a single mother, so that her daughter could have have a better life, so she would be able to go to school, so she wouldn't be hungry every night, so she would have access to clean water, so she would have all of these things that sadly she could not provide for her. And this, this was just, it wasn't her fault. It was just the situation that she was trapped in, this poverty. And so that haunted me just for years and years, and I thought about her every day, obviously. I mean, you don't forget something like that as a mother.
And by the way, she has other children, too.
She does, older siblings, yes. And so she was just in a situation where she wasn't able to support all 3 children. So,
boy, that had to be, you talk about Sophie's choice, had to be a very difficult thing for her to do.
Well, it's just not anything that I can imagine, or somebody in this country, I think a mother in this country, can really imagine having to make that decision. So if you read my children's book, A Thirst for Home, in addition to being about water and the universal, water is something that connects all of us on this earth. It's a common thread between everyone around the world. It's also really about the unconditional love of a mother. And I'm in the story, obviously, but I'm a small part of the book. The story was really inspired and motivated by my daughter's birth mother and how courageous and really the love that she had. And that was really my motivation, and that's what I wrote in order to honor her.
Now, when you were reaching back to her in Ethiopia, it's not easy to do. I mean, it's not as if you have email together. I mean,
no.
And was that something, because we know that that's a very delicate situation here in the United States, about somebody, adopting a child and then what ties are left or unbound as it relates to the biological mother. What about in this particular case? Well,
in this situation, first I'd like to say that my daughter, everything that I talk about, my daughter knows. I don't talk about anything that she's not aware of. I mean, it's delicate for me to try to keep her story private and also share parts of her story so that I can teach people about parts of the world that we don't see all the time. So I just wanted to say that. But, it was very hard for me for many years because I wanted to reach out to her family. I had met her once. I thought about them every single day. Are they hungry? Are they sick? Are they struggling? Every night when I would go to bed, I would think, are they going to bed with empty stomachs, empty bellies? So it was just something that was almost haunting to me. And I tried to work through the adoption agency to keep in contact, or at least to get information to her so that she knew her daughter was doing well, and just to get information about them to see if they were doing well. And I wasn't able to.
Did they encourage that, the adoption agency?
Well, they had a program where you could send information back and forth, and for whatever reason, I never was able to get that information or get confirmation that they got information. So it was very frustrating to me. And so finally my husband and I decided that we couldn't wait any longer, and we went to Ethiopia and found them. And
okay, so you went back in 2012.
I did.
And you wanted to find them. And what was it that you were looking to make certain about? Her condition, how she was doing, how much she understood about what was going on with her biological daughter in the United States. What did you want to share at that moment?
Well, honestly, I didn't really have an agenda. Mm-hmm. I needed to find her. I needed to make sure that my daughter's siblings, this is my family, my daughter connects her biological family and our family. We are one family. And I think it was hard for people to see that for me to not be able to go back and make sure that they're okay was like turning my back on my own family. So I went over there just really wanting to know how she was. Was she struggling? Was she able to provide basic things for my daughter's older siblings? Were they going to school? And I wanted her to know that Eva is here. She's healthy. She's thriving. She's happy, and she's doing well. And I wanted her to see pictures and know that, to have that connection with her daughter, and to know that she wasn't going to live her life not ever seeing her again or not knowing about her. That was important. As a mother, I would want to know that about my child. And so I sort of put myself in her place, thinking this is what I would want, and I needed to give that to her.
And you found, of course, that she was struggling a bit to raise the 2 older siblings. And then you decided, this is so remarkable in terms of somebody willing to give and try to make lives better over there and here. And you helped to start a bread business for them. How did that take hold?
There's so many it's so hard to go over there and want to help, because what works over here does not work over there. It's a different culture. Things are done very differently. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's just different. And so I had to embrace the Ethiopian culture and decide what is the best way that I can help her that's not going to put her in harm's way. And just giving her money was not the way to do it. I needed to help her to try to create some sort of work that was sustainable for her so that she could support herself. And you go back to the old, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish. I'm sure you've heard that.
Yes, then they can fish for themselves forever.
They can fish for themselves.
Now, you also gave them $24 a month to send her children to a private school as opposed to the public school, which had no working latrines, no desks or chairs. And just that story, or at least the way it was, placed in the Republican American article, that your daughter, the lack of, you talk about water, which of course is a big part of your book, but using that as the fundamental, building block that we all need. And I guess when she came to America,
yes.
And you had some water in the driveway?
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Okay, well, the day after we returned from Ethiopia, the first time, with my daughter, Eva, we were out in the front. She was just getting acclimated to her new home. And she had so many changes in the second year of her life, or the beginning of the second year of her life, that we were just trying to be low key and have a very easy day, and there was a puddle in my driveway, and she was thirsty, and she squatted down and she started drinking from it. And to her, it was not a big deal. She was drinking. That's what she was used to. It was clean water from a puddle. It was sparkling. But for me to see her do that, it was just very powerful. And it not only represented the fact that she'd never had clean water from her life in her village, it also represented all of the challenges and struggles she had to overcome just to survive. And that this child, who was 2.5 when we returned home, was already wiser than me. And I'd lived a whole life of 40 years, that she already had overcome obstacles that I can't even imagine having to overcome. And she did it, and she was happy and just loving and just inspiring. And she inspires me. My daughter inspires me, that she's overcome so much, and that she's just a well-adjusted, great kid. And she's just a beautiful child.
Well, it's an amazing story, it really is, and it resulted, of course, not only in this wonderful home for this child, but reaching back to her roots and trying to contribute. And we can add to that part of the story, too, in terms of raising more money for women and youngsters. But I've got to take a break.
Okay.
If you would like to call us, we are here. Christine Ieronimo from Bristol. You may have read the story. Carrie McMillan did a wonderful job on it a couple of weeks back in the Republican American. 203-757-1320. Just as a mom or a dad or a grandparent, you've got to have some questions, I would imagine, about all of this. So give us a call, 203-757-1320 here on WATR. Okay, let's be honest. Okay, Christine Ieronimo is with us here on WATR. We've got about 9 minutes to go. We're telling this remarkable story of adoption as just a beginning as it relates to her daughter from Ethiopia. And you want to remind us, of course, water is a theme that works throughout this. Please, because yesterday I was trying to let my audience know that as a commodity, it's something we do not appreciate. We let it grow in ways that we shouldn't, in terms of letting it lie dormant here in the city of Waterbury in terms of attention to water.
Sure.
And yet it is such a staple, it is such a remarkable resource that we don't appreciate until...
No, we don't. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me when I returned, seeing my daughter drink from that puddle. That clean water and access to clean water is really a miracle. And every time I would turn on that faucet, I would think about that. I mean, I don't think that people realize that more than half of the world lives without access to clean, healthy, potable water, and that it causes illness and death. But we can't live without water. So if there's a choice between not drinking it and drinking dirty water, we have to drink the dirty water. And in Ethiopia, collecting water is a young girl's job. And sometimes sometimes she has to walk miles and miles to collect this water.
And you were saying that that's really the job that women are given in many cases, yeah.
And it's going to make her sick, and water's rationed. And it's something that's very precious over there. And, when these girls collect the water, it keeps them out of school, so they're not able to get an education. It puts them in harm's way because they're at risk for being abducted and assault. And so building a well or bringing a pipeline to a village in Ethiopia or anywhere around the world is so much more about just water. It's about the safety of their children being able to get educated, which is the only way to break that cycle of poverty. And it's about good health, having good health.
Now, yesterday, maybe I overstated it, Christine, but I said that, if we're going to have wars in this world going forward about a resource, it's not going to be about oil, perhaps, in the 21st century. It may be about water. Am I right?
Absolutely. And we're already seeing this. Water is going to be the thing that is going to cause wars more and more. And over in Ethiopia, they have the Blue Nile, which feeds into the Nile. And they're in the middle of building a huge dam, which is going to give them a lot of electrical power. Now, Egypt is going to suffer because this is going to cut off a lot of water that is going to lead to the Nile that feeds, a lot of the Egyptians, and they're not happy about it. And so already this is causing a lot of problems. So what do you do? I mean, I think that Ethiopia deserves to have use of the Blue Nile that's in their country, but the Egyptians don't think so. So this is causing a lot of political unrest already.
Well, the book is called A Thirst for Home, A Story of Water Across the World. And tell us about the book and how you got involved in that. I mean, here you are, a mother who not only adopted this child, brought this child into your home, added to your family by virtue of going back to Ethiopia and being part of that family, caring about them, adding on to your rigors in terms of fundraising for that particular village. But then you decided to write a book and get a great illustrator to work with you. How did you do that? I mean, you're a nurse. I'm
a nurse, yeah. I think that's part of it, being a nurse and just caring about what's going on with people. After I returned and I saw my daughter drinking from the puddle and became obsessed really with this clean water and the problems of unclean water around the world. I always tell people that the hardest part of that first trip to Ethiopia was actually coming home, because I had to come home and live that life that I was accustomed to and see really all of the privileges that we have, but also see what we take for granted. And I saw a lot of that in children and my own children. And I still see that in my own children who really, they hear me talk about it all the time. So I decided that I wanted to share my story with children here in this area, and I did write a story that's similar to the one that actually got published. And an amazing thing happened when I would go into schools. The children were listening, and they would want to help. And I had children bringing me in bags, Ziploc bags of change. How can we help and make a difference? And I thought, I'm onto something. If I can show children what is going on around the world, maybe that will change the way that they think. And when they grow up, they will think differently and want to try to do something to make this world a little bit better.
Yeah, I was talking about it the other day because I read a piece by Colin McEnroe, and I'm not certain that he started this particular notion. I'm sure it was something that he had read at some point. But just because you're on third base doesn't mean you hit a triple. In other words, living here, being born in the United States, we have no idea in many ways what it's like to be born somewhere else, and it's all just fate. And what these folks who don't live in America and other places that have all these amenities, how difficult and different their lives are.
And I always try to share with the kids that I talk with and visit, the country is very different. Ethiopia is very different, and they have so much less than we have. And we should be appreciative of the fact that we are all entitled to an education, because that's just not how it is. But that being said, children in Ethiopia are just like children here. They all want the same things, really basic happiness, family, friends, good health, love. And so when you get rid of all that extra stuff that we have, we're really the same. And so that's really what I want to teach them. And that maybe because we have so much more here, when we grow up or we can do things to make things better in other places, because those are people just like us. And it's hard when people say to me, well, why did you adopt in Ethiopia? We have so many children that need to be adopted here in this country. And I think, but children are children. And when God looks down on our world, he doesn't say, well, these are American children, they deserve this, and these are Ethiopian children. He looks down and says, these are my children, and they're all the same, and they all deserve all of the same love.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I've got to take another quick break. We'll wrap things up with you telling us how people can reach you, find the book, and anything else that you'd like to communicate to us in the final moments of the program here on WATR. Okay, about 30 seconds to go. Christine, if people want to meet you, see you tonight?
I'm going to be at the Terryville Public Library tonight in Terryville, Connecticut at 6 o'clock. I'll be doing a presentation, reading, and a book signing. I'll have books available. So that's tonight at 6. If you want, or people want to find out about how they can be a part of my Gimbichu project, which works with the community in Gimbichu, you can go on my website, www.ChristineIeronimo.com, and there are links to my project, where you can find my book. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it's actually the Barnes & Noble here in Waterbury.
All right, wonderful. Great to meet you.
Thank
you. Congratulations on all your work. 1320 WATR in Waterbury.